Very good evening to everyone. My name is Zhi Siang, currently under Professor Huang Dejian's labs. Today I am presenting a video presentations which is to investigate the alpha amylase inhibitions for Dracoflavan Bs. My video presentation involves 5 parts. Part 1 I will talk about how we prepare the starch. Part 2 we will focus on the serial dilution of the inhibitors. Part 3 of the presentations which involve the pre-incubation of the alpha amylase and the inhibitors. Part 4 of the presentation which is we will add starch to the enzyme inhibitor mixtures. And the final part of the presentations will review whether will Dracoflavan B inhibit alpha amylase. Part 1. Starch preparations. Good afternoon to everyone. Today I will be performing alpha amylase inhibitions of Dracoflavan Bs. The first step of alpha amylase inhibition of Dracoflavan B is to prepare starch. So how we prepare the starch is we first weigh about 0.5 grams of starch into these beakers. After that, we add 25 ml of phosphate buffers into this starch. After we mix the phosphate buffer into the starch, the next thing we need to do is to first stir the mixtures. As we can see from now, the starch has successfully dissolved in the phosphate buffers. The next thing we need to do is to boil the starch. We'll heat the starch for about 2.5 minutes at 400 degrees Celsius at 300 rpm. As we can see from the video is that the starch is now start to boil. So next thing we need to do is to cool down the starch before we add it to our Dracoflavan Bs. Of the presentations, serial dilution of the Dracoflavan Bs. Okay, the next stage of our experiments is to dilute our Dracoflavan B inhibitors. We will dilute this sample 10 times. After we put the sample into this first hole, subsequent hole we will do a 70% dilutions. So the concentration at the second hole is actually 70% of the first hole inhibitor concentrations. . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。
. 。 . 。 . 。 .
As we can see from videos is that when I do dilutions, I only do until whole 11s. Whole 12s, there's no dilution done because whole 12 will be our controls. After that, we will pipette the inhibitor from the A row to the B row at 23 microliters. Three of the presentations, which is to pre-incubate the alpha amylase enzyme with the Dracoflavan Bs. The next stage of my experiments is to add the alpha amylase to my Dracoflavan Bs. So how to add? We first will dilute 0.2 ml amylase salts to 3.8 ml phosphate buffers. Here is the amylase salts. We will draw 200 ml, 200 microliters amylase salts, dilute in these phosphate buffers. After that, we will shake the mixtures to ensure it's homogeneous. The next steps is to add 20 microliters of alpha amylase to our Dracoflavan Bs. So the next step of my experiments is to add 20 microliters of alpha amylase to the Dracoflavan Bs. After we added the alpha amylase to the inhibitors, we will incubate it at 37 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. See you later in 5 minutes. Part 4 of the presentations, addition of starch to the enzyme inhibitor mixtures. After we let the inhibitors to interact with the alpha amylase, the next step we do is to add 60 microliter of starch to the enzyme inhibitor mixtures. So what we need to do first is to pour the starch onto a plate. After that, we draw 60 microliter of starch to the mixtures. After that, we let the mixtures to interact at 37 degrees Celsius for 2 hours. See you back in 2 hours. To the final parts of the presentations, which is to determine whether Dracoflavan B does it inhibit the alpha amylase enzymes. This is the result after 2 hours of enzyme inhibition testings. This is the control. As we increase the concentration of the inhibitor, the graph shifted backwards. And this result clearly shows that our Dracoflavan B can inhibit the diabetes alpha amylase enzymes. Come to the end of the presentations. Thanks for watching the videos.